these educated Frenchmen, they're opening these pamphlets. It looks, and they're going right. They open up these pamphlets and they're like, ha, we know the rumors. You go to New Orleans to die. So they actually crumble it up and throw it into the street. And they're like, okay, this isn't working. What do we do now? We're losing money. So they decide, well, maybe if we take these pamphlets into a population of individuals that had less education, can't read or write, and spoke very, very small percentage of French, maybe we can convince those individuals. And then they choose to go into the prisons. They go into the prisons. There's a plethora of prisoners. Hey guys, come to New Orleans with the Ice Cap Mountains, exploring rivers and gold mines. And by the way, nobody has to know what you guys did to get into prison. You'd have a clean slate and you'll make tons of money. So if you ever wonder where our ancestors are from, right? So they sent over all these prisoners and they begin to build. But then a few months in, they start to notice, they start to disappear onto, big shocker, Bourbon Street. Now at the time, you know, all the essentials, opium dens and bars, and then they also disappear into the swamps. Why are they disappearing into the swamps? They can't figure out why these men are becoming lethargic. They don't want to work. Then it dawns on them, what could a bunch of guys from prison really need here in the swamp that they don't have? Exactly, women! So they're like, these men need brides, like immediately, like now. So they reach out to the Duke d'Orléans and they're like, what is some brides for these guys? And so he sits here and he takes it down and he's like, now, King Louis, do you want to bring over some brides for these men? He's 5 years old. I want to keep the pretty ladies here. You know, that's a good solution. Duke d'Orléans decides, you know what? Let's leave all the pretty ladies here in France and we'll let you have these ladies over here in the mental institutions. Oh my goodness. They actually go into the mental institutions. I'd say 90% of these women are not mentally unsound, okay? Maybe they were tax evaders. Maybe they stole something from the market. Maybe they were accused of witchcraft. Oh, sorry, if you guys come forward in the back. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Be careful. Happy Mardi Gras. Now, these women also, maybe they were accused of witchcraft. And I say that very loosely. Maybe they went into their herb garden, procured herbal tea for their neighbor who had the flu. Oh my gosh, she's a witch, right? Maybe she walked in on her husband having an affair and freaked out. Oh my gosh, she's clearly mentally insane, right? These women were not mentally unsound, guys. They had no choice, though. They hop in a boat, 8-week voyage. Instead of stopping here, though, they stop in Mobile, Alabama. Has anybody been to Mobile? It's okay, you're not missing anything. It's a small downtown area. It's farmland. There's churches. They have a burlesque and drag show there once a month. And then there's all this Mardi Gras paraphernalia everywhere. You're like, what the heck is Mardi Gras stuff doing in Alabama? Believe it or not, the first Mardi Gras that ever took place was in Mobile, Alabama. Obviously, they found a much better location, right? But that is their claim to fame. And also, that was the old capital of Louisiana. And Louisiana, all middle America, all the Mississippi River. Now, there were 2 huge fires here in New Orleans. You might notice the French Quarter doesn't quite feel very French. It feels more Spanish. And you are correct if you think so. First fire was in 1788. That actually destroyed 80% of the structures here in the quarter. Most of the quarter at that time was built with cypress wood. You go up into our swamps and our bayous, there's a plethora of cypress trees everywhere. It combats mold, it smells nice, it's beautiful. However, they didn't know it was highly flammable. 2,000 people died in just 5 hours. Now, the second fire happened a few years later during Spanish rule in 1794. This is the fault of a priest. Typical New Orleans move. He heard there was free booze and food. He's like, where? He leaves his quarters, the window's open, a gust of wind comes in, knocks the candle over, and boom, there you have it, 20% of the quarter burned down. This killed about 500 people in just a few hours. Now, this structure right behind us is the Ursuline Convent. This is one of 3 structures and the oldest of those, and is considered the oldest building in the entire Mississippi River Valley. It's about 400 years old, you guys. 100 years predating America. Pretty incredible.
Is it still a convent?
It is a museum today. It's still run by the Archdiocese. Now, the first Mardi Gras didn't happen until 1856 here. And at that time, that was only 3 years prior to the worst summer of yellow fever here in New Orleans, where we averaged a loss in that August of 1,300 people a week. Wow. A week, you guys. Now, the city limits was the French Quarter minus 2 blocks. Bodies were piled up about 6 feet high. It was blasphemous to burn the bodies back then. But if God did it, it would be okay. They pulled from European design and created these tombs. We're a predominantly Catholic city, so if you were a Catholic, in order to get through those pearly gates of heaven, you had to get your last funerary rites. So of course you got your funerary rites, and then your body was placed on a cement slab within the tomb, bricked in, and you are left there for a year and a day. Within that year and a day, it gets so beyond hot here, as we are not considered the South actually, we are historically the Northern Caribbean. To give you perspective, right before Hurricane Ida last summer, it was 115 heat index. This is why they are nicknamed oven, because literally they will melt a body down in a year and a day, and we still practice this today. Now, aka City of the Dead. Now, people think, oh, there's no burials here in New Orleans. That is false. Did you guys know that the St. Louis Cathedral is actually also a tomb? You will find 50 individuals that are entombed in the St. Louis. Some people even say that there are catacombs, even tunnels underneath the French Quarter. Nobody knows for sure. Now, there are 50 individuals. You know that phrase, the stinking rich? You ever hear that? Yeah. Well, if you were someone who was impoverished, didn't have a lot of money, and you wanted to attend church, well, you would walk in and what you would probably smell something pretty foul. You'd literally be smelling the stinking rich, those corpses that were entombed within the church. This is where the stinking rich comes from. Yeah, right, a good trivial pursuit. Now, we have something here called Second Line Jazz Funerals. We have 900 festivals a year. That's it, just 900 festivals a year, you guys. This last year was the first year we put a cap on those festivals. Oh my God, this mac and cheese is the best mac and cheese I've ever had. Let's throw a festival about it. We totally do. We have a mac and cheese festival. Crawfish mac and cheese is totally a thing. Yes, we even have, and of course, Mardi Gras. Happy Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is a month long, starting at King's Day. The Maid of New Orleans is actually Joan of Arc. Her statue is right across from where we actually started, the gold statue. And we always start on January 6th, King's Day, and with a Joan of Arc parade. This year, led by all of our plague doctors. If you'd like to see the photos, you can definitely look it up. Joan of Arc Parade 2022, and you'll see all those plague doctors running about. Now, getting back to these ladies in Mobile. These ladies get off the boat and they start to talk to the local patrons, but they were also given these pamphlets I told you about. And they were promised, you know, an opportunity to stay. So you guys come forward in the back. Thank you. We're making some room for you guys. So when they get off the boat, they start to talk to the locals. And they're like, oh, where are you guys from? Where are you going to? Oh, we're going to New Orleans. We've heard so much about those ice-capped mountains and the rivers. And we also hear we're going to be married to some very respectable Frenchmen. So, of course, these guys start laughing at these ladies. They're like, you didn't get the memo, did you? They're like, wait, what? Like, don't you know the mosquitoes are as big as birds over there? You know the alligators are as big as the boat you guys sailed in on? You guys are nuts. I'd never go to New Orleans. You go to New Orleans to die. So, of course, these women are in shock. They're like, oh, my gosh, I don't want to go there now. Can we stay here with you guys? And one of these guys going to say, no, we don't need women. So, obviously, they stay in Mobile. We're sitting here. We're like, where are these brides at? What's going on? And then whispers reach New Orleans that the brides aren't coming, but we also hear they're not very respectable ladies. So, reaching out to the Duc d'Orléans, and they're like, so, you know these ladies, they're not coming. We also heard they're not very respectable ladies. Can you please send us some respectable brides? And the Duc d'Orléans has a big old sense of humor because he sends some ladies. But he sends the nuns! And you guys, they didn't get none. That's my groan. I gotta have one groaner. Just one groaner of the tour. There it is. There it is. 1727, the Ursuline nuns come down. This structure started to be built around 1723, 24. St. Mary's Church was added on in the 1800s. Beautiful church. No longer an active church as of a few years ago. This is now a museum, still run by the Archdiocese. Now, when those nuns got here, they kicked all those convicts out of those opium dens and bars and like, all right, guys, get to work. And after a while, they realized there's still an issue of population. There's a tour coming back from the back. Or thank you. So they reach out to the Duc d'Orléans, and he then sends king's men into the German countryside. They sit down with these young 12 to 13-year-old daughters of these farmers out in the middle of the German countryside, and they are offered a small dowry, 2 pieces of jewelry, 2 beautiful ball gowns, an opportunity to stay with some wholesome Ursuline nuns, get a free room and board, an education, spread the word of God, and then be married to some very respected, very fine convicts, right? Now, these parents are like, wow, honey, that sounds like a great idea. Here's your luggage. Good luck. They go down to the docks, and at last minute, they are instructed to go down below deck for the entire voyage. Now, why? Because they're also ex-mercenaries. These are not the greatest guys. They want to make sure these young girls arrive safely. But what does this mean? This means no direct sunlight, no air conditioning. Keep in mind these convicts come from different places throughout Europe. All these men are sitting here waiting, and they're excited that these future brides are finally making their way over. It's a 2-month voyage. Now, when these girls are on the voyage about 2 weeks in, typhoid fever breaks out. Typhoid can make you liquefy from the inside out, causing you to bleed from your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose. So when all these young girls arrive here in New Orleans, they are so beyond sick and in bad condition. All these men come from different places throughout Europe. They grew up with folklore stories. Nobody knows how the human body works. Nobody has disproved that any of these stories are untruths. Also, these men can't read or write, not very educated. For example, we have Tinkerbell. You guys know Tinkerbell, yeah? You're not scared of Tinkerbell, right? Well, if you're a child that grew up in Ireland, they're demons and eat children, so you might be running the other direction. So it really depends on where you grew up. So by the way, that's our first example of what I call French Quarter squirrels. You guys seen Up?
Yes.
Have you seen Up? Remember at the end, they're like, squirrel! Okay, so we have a lot of Mardi Gras and French Quarter squirrels. That's Exhibit A. We're going to experience some squirrels on this tour. And I know, lots of distractions, you guys. Now, when these young girls arrive, they're so sick, and all these men line up just waiting to check out these future brides. They start to hear the words, "Move la casquette, move la casquette." And these small boxes come out from the bottom of this boat. And they're like, where are our brides? Wait a minute, did he say casket? Does he mean coffin? Did our brides perish at sea? What's going on here? This is very strange. Are they hiding something from us? I don't trust those priests. And one by one, these boxes emerge. About 20 minutes in, they finally see the first young girl emerge from the bottom of the boat. Long, stringy blonde hair, sunken in cheeks, oversized teeth, very pale, emaciated, skeletal. And she walks up into that light, and her eyes are squinting because she has not been exposed to sunlight for about 8 weeks. And then finally, when she does, they see her face, and she has blood coming from her mouth. Now, one by one, these young girls emerge from the bottom of the boat in similar conditions, bleeding from their eyes, their ears, their mouth, and nose. And very quickly whisked away to that Ursuline convent. Understandably, they're sick. These men have been in prison. They haven't been exposed to all these new diseases that are popping up left and right at this time. They also don't know how the human body works. They also grew up with a lot of folklore. So what do we do here in New Orleans when we're trying to solve a problem?
Party.
Close. We drink. And back then, the water could kill you. So even the kids were getting lit. So, sir, you'd be drinking it up on Bourbon Street as well. So they go to Bourbon Street and they drink on it. And they drink until they come up with the only drunken solution. Let's go down to the Ursuline convent. We'll kick open the door and we'll beat up a priest. Seems logical. So that's what they do. They actually go down here and they beat up this poor man of the cloth. Things get out of control and out of hand. They are convinced at this point that these girls are a threat. They involve the archdiocese and the archbishop, and they place an order to have these girls sent up to the 3rd floor where those shutters are. And they literally sent over a blessed hammer and nails from France and hammer these girls in from the outside in. Why? They were convinced these young ladies potentially could be vampires. Now, unfortunately, this is a true story. This is the oldest vampire story here in New Orleans called the Casket Girls. There are many different versions of the story. This is the one I believe to be the most historically sound. Oftentimes, when you investigate our folklore stories, it's going to be more the Hollywood version online. We have these little badges. We are actually one of 4 states in the United States that requires our tour guides to take exams, background check, and drug tests before we are up and running. With the ghost tours, there is a lot of interviews, a lot of processing to actually get to the nitty gritty. You chose Legendary Walking Tours, so I try to be as concrete as I possibly can. If it's a cool folklore story, I'm going to tell you first thing. Now, this is said to be a very active place still today, and do we still believe this? Well, 2005, Hurricane Katrina rolled in, and when Hurricane Katrina came in, those shutters burst out. Well, guess 2 months later what the Archdiocese sent over? Another blessed hammer and nails and shutters. Pretty bizarre, right?
Was there water up this far?
So, because we're 9 feet above sea level, the highest point behind in the quarter is 9 feet behind the cathedral. So we got a lot of wind damage. We actually got more damage from Hurricane Ida. Yeah, that's why our beloved Central Grocery is closed. There is no roof. Yeah, but a lot of, and obviously we have those levees and new barricades, so we're prone to disaster, and yet that is another reason why we are licensed guides, because they want to make sure that we give you the right information, right? So right behind you is the Beauregard Ties House. This is also a museum today, and if you look through these gates right behind, this is the only labyrinth garden here in the quarter. It's a maze garden. It's absolutely gorgeous. One of the things about being a ghost tour guide here in New Orleans, I have a lot of clairvoyants, mediums, and psychics that actually always come on my tours. I was warned of this before I became a ghost tour guide. I didn't realize how often it's actually going to take place. They don't advertise to the group. I've had one advertise, and I'm like, but when you have several individuals come to the same destination and tell you things before you get there about a story that is not posted online, you tend to wonder. Now, a lot of the psychics that have come on this tour, French Quarter Squirrel, have said that this courtyard behind you is probably one of the most haunted courtyards here in the French Quarter. The spirits love to reside there. They love the beauty, apparently. Now, when Beauregard actually moved here, it was right after the Civil War. He fought in the bloodiest part of the Civil War called the Battle of Shiloh. Now, he actually acquired antique pieces of furniture from the homes of people he killed, and when he moved here, he started to experience hallucinations and nightmares. So, right beside us where those flags are, that is the Provincial Hotel. That is an ex-Civil War hospital. A lot of people lost their limbs in that hospital. Here we have what is called residual hauntings. So, residual hauntings are general, if you have an individual that has like sun up, sundown, done the same thing every single day for a long period of time, you might experience things from that time before. For example, a very common complaint staying there is being woken up at the same time every single night to your legs suddenly being pulled. A lot of limbs amputated over there. So, 2 of the things that actually Beauregard wrote about and complained about is hallucinations. Number 1, he heard bombs going off in the middle of the night, ran to that front patio beside, and saw all these soldiers standing at attention, saluting the Ursuline convent, and just vanished. Another thing he complained about is ballroom music constantly waking him up. Now, he ran to the ballroom one night and then ended up seeing all these silhouettes of people waltzing and then just suddenly vanish. This might sound a little familiar if you are a fan of Walt Disney, Haunted Mansion much? Which Joyride Haunted Mansion is actually being filmed here in the quarter right now.
No kidding.
They're doing like a remake. Now, after he passed, people just thought, oh, this poor man suffered at the hands of a brutal war. And then a woman by the name of Frances Keyes, she didn't believe any of the ghost stuff. She moved in here. She wrote a famous novel called Dinner at Antoine's. And I believe they made a 1950s film after it. But she was here for a very short duration. Can anybody guess how long she stayed here? Yes! Oh my gosh, first try. 24 hours, you guys. She actually had similar complaints. She had experiences that Beauregard had talked about. She's like, oh no, I'm out, and she left. The irony is I've had 2 psychics in 2 different years, separate from each other, say that they sensed her spirit walking around. She was only here for 24 hours. How long have you guys been on? Now, in 1978, there were 4 young girls. They heard all about the Casket Girls, right? And they were in film school. 1978, film school didn't have the greatest equipment. They came down here with their sleeping bags, their cameras, their equipment, every cliche for a vampire you can imagine: garlic, wooden stakes, silver. And then, of course, it's about 11 at night. They're having a good old time, and you know, it's New Orleans, and they're in their early 20s, so obviously they have a bottle of booze with them. Yeah. Security officer comes around and he sees these girls setting up, and he's like, "Oh Lord, what are these girls doing?" So he goes up. He's like, "Ladies, you cannot hang out here. You guys are going to get mugged or something worse." "Oh, come on. We're just here to film. You know the Casket Girls, right?" "Yes, I know all about Casket Girls." "Well, we're here to capture them. But don't worry, we've got a wooden stake. We'll stab anybody that messes with us." He's like, "No, ladies, I can't have you stay out here." Back and forth. This went for about 20 minutes. Finally, the guy was like, "Ladies, I got to make my rounds. You have till midnight. I'm going to go do my rounds, come back in an hour. If you're still here, I'm going to have to escort you off the premises." Of course, they're not happy about this, but they'll take anything they can get. So he comes back around an hour later. And when he comes back around, of course, these girls are nowhere to be found. Sleeping bags are empty. But peculiar, all of their equipment is shattered on the ground all the way down to the foot of the St. Mary's Church. Now, these girls were actually, and at this point, this isn't a red flag still, guys. It's New Orleans. He's like, maybe they got drunk, maybe they got in a fight, maybe they're on Bourbon Street, 24-hour clubs over there. So he tells the morning officer, he's like, "Look, here's the description of these ladies. Will you keep an eye out for them? I have a feeling they just got in a fight." Now, these girls were missing for 24 hours. 24 hours. 24 hours later, they were actually all discovered. Dead on the footsteps of the St. Mary's Church with puncture marks in their neck. Now, they were taken to the morgue, and what was discovered is 80% of their blood was removed from their bodies. This sounds like... Yes, you got the mama reflex. Now this sounds, like it's completely made up, right? But believe it or not, this is actually in the police reports in the archives. These young girls, nobody knows why they were killed in the fashion they were killed. They could never figure it out. But did you guys also know that we're the birthplace of the Italian mob in America?
You are? Oh my goodness.
Not Chicago, not New York. So they actually have some inclinations that maybe that could have been part of it. They honestly don't know. But scientifically, you guys, the only way that this actually could be done, vampires. No, just kidding. Now, actually, the only way this could be done is through embalming, pushing the fluids through. That's the only way scientifically this could be done. They don't know. This is still one of New Orleans' biggest unsolved crimes, and there are literally hundreds of stories attached to this location, but I chose this one because it's actually in the police. Now, the next location is the most intense story on this tour. It will lighten up after this story, but this is, I'm just warning you, it's the most intense story on the tour. This is an American Horror Story favorite. Any of your American Horror Story fans? Yeah. Okay. If you haven't seen the series, don't worry. I'm going to be talking about the actual real history behind 2 individuals. So before we travel to this next location, out of respect for the dead, I'd just like to give thanks to the ancestors of this land. Please offer protection for my empaths, my sensitives, and tour goers as we respectfully talk about those that lost their lives. Much love and light, and blessed be. Please do follow me. So the structure we're going to be talking about is on the left corner up here with the balcony and the plant. It is a three-story structure. This is about a 10,000 square foot mansion today. All the gray. The lights are actually turned off for the color of the vampire around the left. So in the early 1800s, a woman traveled here by the name of Madame Delphine Hardy. And she was actually from France. Her previous husband, first husband she was married off to when she was 17 years old. He was in his late 50s. He was actually involved in Spanish politics, but not the greatest politics because he got stabbed in the back and murdered. Second husband dies mysteriously. Nobody knows how this guy dies. Big shock. So when she travels here to New Orleans, she actually falls in love a third time and marries a young physician. Remember, at this time, people didn't know how the human body works, so a lot of experimentation and so forth. And his name was Louis Lalaurie. They instantly fell in love. They purchased this mansion, which originally was 2 stories in an attic space. And this guy actually, his specialty, and we know this from the advertisements throughout the French Quarter, his specialty, believe it or not, was to treat hunchbacks, which I think is the craziest thing. It's like, how many hunchbacks were there back then, right? To have a profession? It's totally wild. Now, at this time, what carried over from the 1700s was a moral code instilled to protect the enslaved people. This did not work. This was called the Code Noir. Now, what did this mean? That meant slaves were allowed holidays off, 1 day off of rest, and on their 1 day off of rest, they would actually go to Louis Armstrong Park today, which is back in Congo Square. And this is their 1 day of rest to connect with their wives, their brothers, their sisters, their friends, hopefully. Their 1 day off of rest to practice the religion of voodoo. It's not voodoo, that's the Hollywood name. It is actually voodoo. New Orleans voodoo religion is actually very holistic in nature, very much misunderstood. Gotta love Hollywood. No sacrificing human lives. And actually, I will be talking about that a little bit later in the tour. So they would drum and dance and so forth, eyes rolling in the back of the head, feeling their saints and their spirits. Well, guys, what do we do at Woodstock? Right?
Were you there?
No. But dancing, maybe no. But you know, dancing, you know, and you're like, oh my God, minus the other fun stuff. But like dancing, you know, closing your eyes and you're feeling the music, and you don't even know that you're around thousands of people, right? There you have it. Now, what was interesting is at that time there was a rampart wall that when the Spanish came over, 1762 after the fire, they actually implemented a rampart wall around the French Quarter. So this rampart wall was around the French Quarter, kind of like a medieval style city.
Just doing that on
Oh yeah,
purpose.
she's having a rough time, you guys.
Yeah. Too much to drink.
Yeah, big shock.
Yeah.
When the Spanish created this wall, the intention was to keep out the swampland, also hostile natives, and also there was something called the French Revolution. And that French Revolution actually inspired the slaves in Haiti, and they actually had themselves the only successful one in the world's history of slave rebellion, when they overtook the French and the Spanish. All those newly freed slaves traveled here to New Orleans, but they were not allowed within the confines of these rampart walls. They didn't want any of our slaves to get wind of the rebellion and get any ideas. And after they passed, we're going to mosey on a little bit further. So as they would go in Congo Square, they practiced the religion of voodoo, they connected with their loved ones, hopefully, and also gave them the opportunity to feast. They also befriended the Native American tribes, which they actually taught them how to animal shift, which if you guys had a really tough life, would you guys want to be a bird for an afternoon, right? So they actually traded and came together and feasted. If you were an enslaved enslaved person, unfortunately, you were considered one a human being back when. So you were given very small portions of food. So by the end of the week, you were starving. So after feasting, anything left over, they would actually sell, giving them the opportunity to do the next thing in the Côte d'Ivoire, the ability to purchase their freedom. And if you purchased your freedom, you could actually buy slaves of your own. You probably wouldn't call them slaves, you might call them grandma, your brother, your sister, your friends, giving them the opportunity to save money and then purchase their freedom. Now, this also prevented slave owners from beating their slaves. Unfortunately, this did not work. If they really wanted to punish their slaves, they could actually pay somebody else to do it for them. If you were born onto a plantation, for example, the Laura Plantation. Laura Plantation had its own coin. So that being said, if you got your freedom the moment you stepped off, guys, you were broke. So this is the way a lot of those individuals that would try to make it, couldn't make it, and ended up going back to the plantations. If you were born into this world and your grandfather had a debt to the master, pretty much since day one, you're kind of stuck. So this is just a small little window of that perspective. Now, unfortunately, New Orleans was the biggest slave trade city in America at one point. A lot of international performers made it through here, international artists, musicians. We are number one on the list for a lot of things, and also last on the list for a lot of things. The Côte d'Ivoire made a lot of the locals pay attention to how other people were treating their enslaved people. And they started to notice the Lalaurie started to get a bad reputation for always having slaves that had bags under their eyes. They didn't look like they were nourished well, very mistreated. One week they'd see one person, the next week they'd see somebody else, and then they'd never see that person ever again. Now, they're also always up at the slave auction as well, so way more frequently than the average couple. Now, talking about the kind of wealth that Lalaurie had, even without her ex-husband's money, it is said that she was worth in 1830 a whopping $1 billion.
Oh, wow.
That is crazy, crazy amount of money. The kind of money we're talking about is when she would throw these big parties with her husband, she would actually hire an opera singer, and they would ship out for 2 months and sing for one night. That's the kind of money we're talking about. Wow. Some people joked and said she was worth as much as the U.S. Mint, which the old U.S. Mint is actually our jazz museum today. Now, those African tribes that connected with the Haitian slaves, they're descendants of the African American Mardi Gras Indians. If you wish to actually learn more of the history, the Jazz Museum has a whole new installation. Highly encourage you guys to check that out. Congo Square is probably one of the most historic places to visit here in New Orleans, aka Louis Armstrong Park. And still today, votive practitioners will go there and give offerings to their saints at the foot of a tree called the Witness Tree, aka the Egon Tree. You'll know this tree when you see it. It's extremely large and old. They started to rumor about her for quite some time, but the first red flag happened as she was getting ready for a party. There was a young 12-year-old slave girl named Leah. Now, this handmaiden was brushing her hair, and unfortunately for Leah, she pulled just slightly too hard. Lalaurie turns to her, smacks her down, and proceeds to chase this young girl around the second story with a riding crop, where she falls into the center courtyard to the left and actually dies. Now, we all have a nosy neighbor, and this nosy neighbor saw all this go down and reported her to the authorities, but remember, this woman is worth $1 billion. So when she was taken to court, she was literally just slapped on the wrist. They said, "Bad man, Lalaurie, here's a $300 fine. You're no longer allowed to purchase slaves." 24 hours later, they're back up at the slave auction. Guess who shows up to buy her slaves? Her friends and her family. I can't even imagine being catapulted back into this horrible situation. Now, keep in mind, at this time, death was a very commonplace thing to see. A dead body in the street is not a shocking thing to see at that time. People are very desensitized. They would mask it with opium, absinthe, alcohol, and camouflage it with essential oils and incense. Things like so. You think the French Quarter smells stinky today? Just imagine it back then, guys. People going to the bathroom in the streets. Pretty gross. Now, we're going to scooch a little bit further. Now, cold for 3 months out of the year. You're here for the coldest month of the year. This fire breaks out during this great heat party, and they don't want to stop, so they push everybody out into the street. It's a very common thing. We're the Northern Caribbean. We party in the streets. We party about everything. We have over 900 festivals a year. Fire brigade men arrive, and everybody's partying in the street where you are standing now. And the fire brigade men, they go inside and they start to search and hunt around where the source of the fire is coming from. And they discover it's coming from the kitchen. And they go into this kitchen, and they discover a 70-year-old woman chained by her ankle to the stove with a chainsaw beside her. She was defecated and a clock to her right. The poor woman was chained night and day, no reprieve. The mental breakdown of this, I can't even comprehend. Now, this actually was a suicide attempt. Now, when she was taken outside, she was asked by these fire brigade men, firemen, why did you start this fire? And in broken French, she replied, I would sooner die than bring attention to what was happening in this house. They go up to that attic and disappear with everyone else. Now, while, in today's terms, we would be frantic about this and immediately go for the attic. Back then, unfortunately, if you were an enslaved person, you were considered one a human being. Now, they made their way through the second story and took their time to see if there's any individuals that may be hiding from the flames. Because as they're putting the fire out, guess what billows upward? All that smoke. Their vision becomes impaired. Sweat dripping down their backs and their brows. They make their way through the structure. They find no one. They go up to the third story where the attic is, just the attic. The third story is a later addition today. And they see that there's two huge chains and locks over the door. It's very suspicious. They make their way back downstairs and realize they have to gather their lanterns. And that head fire brigade then goes out into the crowd. There he finds Lalaurie entertaining her guests. And she denies them. I can't be bothered with this right now. I have a party to attend to. No, ma'am, you don't understand. Legally, I have to check the entire premises, making sure no embers reignited your flame. She's like, I don't care. And I don't know where your stupid key is either. She walks off into the party. So that fire brigade man takes a step back. He gathers the items that he needs and informs the fire brigade men to follow him up to the attic, breaking through this door. And when he does, he quickly gets pushed back and falls to his knees and begins to cough and hack. And he actually vomits. Fire brigade men to the right and left fall to their knees as well, coughing and hacking. Because there's only one smell that's this rancid. It has to be that. Maybe a large animal that's died, but what is an animal doing up here in the kitchen? As they collect themselves, they pull their lanterns forward as they're pulling handkerchiefs from their back pockets, covering their noses and their mouths, and they finally look into this attic room and see what they're smelling. Now, this next part of the story, I am actually going to tell you what is actually documented in the police reports. They found that the entire floor was covered in different piles of body parts, covered in mealworms and cockroaches. Off to the side, they found a woman with no arms and no legs, with carvings throughout her entire body that kind of resembled the pattern of a cow. As if somebody had taken a knife and cut her long enough for it to heal, slowly continuing that process throughout her entire body. A man was strung up in front of them, a hole carved into his brain, the hole beside him was slit, cut all the way down the center. Some had feces shoved into their mouths, and their mouths all shut. Off to the side, they find 3 cages. No movement in the back, but they find slight movement in the front. Discover it's a woman inside. South brings it out the side, inside the They pull apart one side, and she doesn't unfold like a normal woman should. I can't figure out what's happening. The 2 fire brigade men go to the other side, and as they pull this case apart, they discover this poor woman's elbows and ankles are broken. 3 seconds. The only way this poor woman could actually move was on her back, and she was later missing in the back. And unfortunately, this is a true. And because of this horrible tragedy, this is said to be the most haunted home in all the world. And this all happened in a very short amount of time. And these men, they couldn't take anymore. They had to go downstairs. They had to reassess. A lot of them are having a hard time keeping what's in their stomachs down in their stomachs. So they break away and come downstairs, frantically trying to decide what to do next. People within the party slowly, like a chain reaction, begin to listen in on what these men are talking about. And and the party stops. Everyone is angry. They start looking around for the Lawleries. They don't see them anywhere. The men decide that they need to take action. They disperse to their homes in close proximity, gathering firearms, knives, whatever they can. They want to kill the Lawleries. They want to destroy this mansion. All these women left behind start to weep and cry, and some of them actually faint in the street. The sheer sight of these individuals being carried out, about 12 to 15 individuals. And right as that mob begins to gather and push forward in to destroy this mansion, out where this rounded gateway is, that is the carriageway, comes Lawlery, her husband, and 2 daughters, and literally they burst through this angry mob, and they do everything they can to stop this carriage, and they fail. Making their way to the Poncha train, fleeing then to New York, and then a few weeks later spotted fleeing to France. You got $1 billion in the 1800s. You can erase yourself pretty much. This is owned by one person, a guy by the name of Michael Whaling, who very rarely stays here. He refuses Hollywood. He refuses to talk about anything that happens on the interior. He's an oil tax tycoon. Oh yeah, he's an oil tax tycoon. There is a caretaker that lives up here. She actually lives here year round, but she's actually signed a disclosure agreement. So she's not allowed to talk about anything that happens on the premises. You're going to find that people are very open or very closed about paranormal stories, situations. Generally, it's out of respect for the dead. Thanks to the most current writers, American Horror Stories, Susan Lee Coven, Lawlery gets her comeuppance. And in this series, they bury this woman alive for 100 years, dig her up, turn her into a slave, cut her head up, and force her to walk roots. Still American Horror Story, right? And this is actually her legacy to be written off in these ways. Because unfortunately, in real life, she did get away. Nobody knows what happened to her. There is a McCarty tomb, which is very peculiar, in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. They don't. I'm sure she didn't. Oh, if you guys come forward. He is a physician. I have no doubt. There's no way that she could have worked alone with some of the stuff they found. But a lot of people embellish what happens up there, and I think that's very disrespectful. But please know that that mob actually did a number on this place. They did tear down the attic after the cabin. American Horror Stories season will come and it's not in the crowd but there is the first episode where it shows Kathy Bates playing Lawlery's character and her torture chamber. She does a great job. Minus the bull's head, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you see it. Unfortunately, it's fairly accurate. Minus the character. Now, within the series, there is a woman that was born in 1801 in September, and this woman was named Marie Laveau. She's considered the good queen of New Orleans, very much misunderstood. In the series, they try to, intertwine Lawlery's character with hers, but in real life, folks, Marie Laveau is revered as a saint. Lawlery sadist. Though they exist at the same time, they did not run in the same social circle. So I always like to make sure that's really important to tell you guys. Now, after this happened, guys, she was vacant for 40 years. Nobody wanted to stay here, but keep in mind the life expectancy of people was short. So 40 years, a lot of people had already gone. 40 years later, they're like, well, this is a prime piece of real estate. Let's put some positive energy in there. They decided to open an all-girls boarding school. Really bad idea. So, of course, these young girls are about 7 years old, and they start to complain to the educators and the headmasters. They're like, Miss, I can't go to sleep. I woke up and I couldn't breathe, and there was a woman in a black dress choking. Please, Miss, I keep hearing screams in the middle of the night. Please, I keep having these horrible nightmares. I woke up and there was a man in chains being chased by a woman in a black dress in the hall. A lot of these things happen, but nobody believes the kids. Right? Perfect premise for a horror movie, right? Nobody believes the kids. Believe the kids, right? Now, and they're more sensitive too. And also, check out your pets, guys. Notice your dog's barking at the wall. They're saying hi to somebody. Now, nothing happens until one of the educators has an experience and opposes the school. This educator has an infant son crying in the middle of the night, so like any good mom, she goes, checks on her infant son, and then discovers this woman in the black dress, black-haired up, hovering over the crib. She realizes very quickly this is not one of the other educators there. So she screams at this woman, chases her around into the hall, and literally this woman runs into the wall, disappears. She's rubbing her eyes, thinking, oh my gosh, I gotta be asleep, what's going on? back into the nursery, goes to pick up her infant son, and notices her son has a sock pressed into his mouth. This freaks everyone out, and it closes school. All of a sudden, all those kids, you know, the letters and everything start to make sense. And then guess what? It brings attention that it's a haunted mansion again. And we're the northernmost Caribbean. We're a hustle city. So they're like, oh, haunted, huh? Let's open a haunted pub. About 1880s. Now they open a haunted pub. People go there to drink spirits. They don't expect to see tormented spirits. They end up passing out at the bar and then wake up screaming and talking about how this woman dissected them alive on their beds. People never want to come back. Then it becomes a furniture store. This guy doesn't believe in ghosts either. He tries to open up the first day, smells something funky, opens the doors, and everything's covered in blood pieces and urine. And he's like, it's gotta be the kids. They know it's haunted. It's the kids for sure, right? So he's like, all right, I'm gonna take the last of my savings. I'm gonna have to chuck this inventory, license and stuff. This is my last shot at a business, but I'm gonna teach these kids lessons. So I'm gonna get my shotgun and I'm gonna hide in the back, in the dark, and scare them, right? Night before he opens. Well, guys, coffee back then is not the coffee of today. He ends up passing out for 15 minutes, wakes up, smells something funny. Gas lamp moves forward, and there it gets everything covered again in blood pieces. It was an apartment for Italian immigrants. It was so many different things. I mean, residence business, nothing staying. There's a lot of locations here in the quarter that have a similar experience. Extremely active places. One week in graveyard folks. Just think about that 1 week in Yellow Fever just in the front corner of 1,300 losses. Now, Yellow Fever lasts about 67 years. That's pretty extreme. That's within 100 years. Well, we're 400 years old. Yes, ma'am.
So over there, so does he have this kind of like what it used to be, or did he bring his own stuff in there? Or nobody knows?
I mean, it's one guy's private residence, so he barely stays there. He's only here for certain festivals. I got to talk to him once. It was 2020. It's one of the only tour guides out here. Braving the storm. 2020. After a hurricane, after a Halloween hurricane. You guys heard about our Halloween hurricane? That was fun. Yeah, and he came out here and he's like, you know, you want to ask one question? And I was like, it was totally on the spot. And I was like, do you experience any activity in the house? And he goes, define activity. And turned around and he walked away. But it was all impromptu. I was like, man, oh, I can't believe that happened. But he usually never talks to people. This actually was burned down during the Great Fires. And then, so, I mean, honestly, this structure was rebuilt a couple times. So this is over 300 years old. Now, 2008, an actor actually buys this property. This actor, you guys know, is Nicolas Cage.
Oh,
And when Nick Cage travels here, he is spending money left and right. Like it's nothing. Just nothing. He had a lot of arrests under his belt here in the world. Very hard to do, mind you. He got involved in a lot of, not the greatest habits. He's on the verge of filing bankruptcy. A lot of the locals didn't appreciate his rude behaviors. His marriage went downhill, his career went downhill, and then even the mayor basically kicked him out of the city. There was a newlywed couple that just got married in their tuxedo and bridesmaid dress, and he called the bride ugly. And he's like, you're out. last shot, you're out. So his way of protesting and saying that you can't make me leave, he actually buys a property in St. Louis Cemetery number 1, a gaudy pyramid tomb that doesn't match any of the other tombs. None of the locals like it. But what's interesting is it's right around the corner from Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans tomb, which is very interesting. People say that that he was protesting against the mayor, but the locals say that he was convinced he was cursed for this property. He talked to locals, priests and voodoo priestesses, and asked for suggestions. And what do you do when you have upset spirits here in New Orleans? You give offers. So, being the arrogant office guy that he was, he's like, well, what better offer? So he buys, so the locals say he bought this tune, which was an ode to the national treasure, right? But this is part of the story. This is true. He actually ran into two big problems while creating this tune. Two graves. And he had to move to accommodate this tune. And he's not. Oh, I know. So people say if he wasn't first support, it's pretty mild. This is why we're not the greatest Nick Cage fans, but Nick Cage isn't so hopefully you can't overhear me right now. And none of the brothers. You never know. You never know. Yeah, he disappeared until about 2020. You guys notice he hasn't been around? Yeah. And he got back up. It's because of this. Feel free to go online. You see this big Russian lines and everything. Pop up. Boom, 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 boom. Now, the third story is a later edition. You get after the second story. Now, American Horror Story Season 3 was actually shot right around the corner. Unfortunately, there is filming, but tomorrow during the day there shouldn't be. So this street here is actually Royal Street. Royal and Governor Nichols. So if you'd like to check this out tomorrow, when it's not, you have 5 million film trucks there. We're actually going to make our way down and to the left. I don't know if I was able to sneak past there with my group a little bit ago. We'll just have to see if there's that. If not, I think we'll have to go up to the residential side of Bourbon, which is past St. Philip. It's all residential. On Bourbon Street, on this path, you know, the actor who plays Morpheus on The Matrix. Yeah, he lives 2 blocks up. Yeah. It's actually having some margaritas with a friend of mine. I just walked out. Morpheus! So this is the Interview with the Vampire series. It's actually
contemporary journalism is what it is. Like, despite that around 250 or so bodies were discovered in this place, unfortunately, we have a pretty good idea of how many people they
to operate able to see the body. All the flesh.
I don't want to be that person.
You guys are all getting your steps now, huh?
Yeah.
Behind me with the red doors, so that you guys need some space when you do. Has anybody seen the series, The Original? Okay. Yeah, it's a vampire series. It's a spin-off of Vampire Diaries, or perhaps a series called Into the Badlands. So if you've seen either of those, this is actually used for filming for the series. But in the early 1800s, a man traveled here by the name of Jacques Saint Germain. He was a count. Tons of money when he arrived. Spoke 9 different languages. He had multiple instruments to play them. He had no problem with the ladies. No problem. Now at these huge events that he would go, he noticed very quickly that he was a very peculiar guy. Never, ever, ever eat in public. And he would only drink the wine from his wine cellar. Single wine cellar, had wine all around the world. This gentleman had so much information under his belt on history, sciences, humanities. He can sprout Italian poetry over here, Russian poetry over here, and talk about warfare like he was actually in war 500 years ago, right? This guy had a crazy amount of information. You're going to hear the words Creole and Cajun a lot. Creole is European descent, New Orleans-born city folk. That's French, Spanish, Haitian, German, Irish, Italian, New Orleans-born city folk. It's a big old mountain. Originally, Creole was first generation in this country, and then solidified to Cajun, French Arcadian, Canadian, by swampland. You're going to find Zydeco music out there. It's pretty cool. If you like Creole and like spicy food? You don't like spicy food? Ah, you've eaten our chicken here, haven't you? You've eaten our chicken. By the way, #1 chicken in the South, even though we're not technically in the South, we actually #1 chicken. So if you guys haven't had fried chicken here, I swear, and people think I'm joking, the gas station fried chicken is said to be some of the best chicken that you will ever have. I'm so serious. I have friends that fly into town, take me to the gas station. Seriously. Taste some chicken from the gas station. One particular evening, Count Saint Germain invited this beautiful young Creole girl. Everybody leaves from the party. They go upstairs. Things get a little hot, a little bit heavy as he kisses her hand, and that kiss travels to her cheeks, her forehead, her side, pulls her shoulders in, kisses her neck, and then bites her neck, causing her to bleed. Now, in the movie Interview with a Vampire, there is a scene where the vampire Lestat is showing Louis how to feed for the first time. It's shot an hour from here in Baton Rouge at an actual real plantation back in the day called Oak Alley Plantation. In the movie, the girl bitten is so enraptured she has no idea she's bitten. How do you think that went in real life, though, guys? A lot of screaming, get the heck off me, right? So she manages to break free from this crazy count. She goes to the window and it's bolted. Goes to the next window and it's bolted. She panics. She kicks that window open. She's pulling away the glass shards. She's cutting her fingers and her arms. And she's frantic as nobody's replying to her screams. He grabs her shoulders and saying, "Please calm down, come back." She swings her elbows back. And then she manages to step through that window, but falls on her side as he's grabbing her skirt tail. She kicks his hand away and realizes she's trapped up there. She's got to jump. So she takes a leap of faith. And she does not die. She breaks her leg. She has so much adrenaline in her body that she manages to hop to and literally goes down to the police station as close as they can. By the time all these officers arrive here, which are also ex-mercenaries, they find an abandoned mansion and tons of wine in the cellar. Oh, score, they think, right? Don't want any of this to go to waste. Pop open a cork, take a swig, quickly spit it out. Half blood and half wine. Isn't it weird that this actually is a true story? Nobody knows why he actually left. It wasn't just about the girl. It was an incident. Some people say that he murdered somebody. They don't really know why he left town, but when he did leave town, he left behind a wine cellar that was half blood. People did weird things back in the day, you guys. People didn't know how the human body worked. They discovered that iron was in blood. A lot of people thought that it had healing properties. People were doing weird things. In American Horror Story Season 3, they throw that in there and make Lalaurie be the one to drink blood, bathe in blood, all the things. They don't know that to be true. They threw it in because it's something that did happen here in the French Quarter. Pretty wild. People would hear story, Mary Queen of Scots, those things with blood. This is an international port city. Now, this actually inspired Anne Rice, the writer, to create the Vampire Lestat. So, my friends, we are standing at the foot of the real Vampire Lestat's home, Count Saint Germain. Pretty fun, huh? It's a private residence, and the only information that the public is allowed is he's a divorce lawyer. Oh, just people have heard stories. This is an international port city, so just about the baby with the blood and the drinking blood. Some people did for beauty, some people did for longevity. It's huge, huge. Now, here's the thing. The owner of the properties, we're talking a lot of money. They can choose what is exposed to the public and what can't be. So if you try to look up like the price of how much the Lalaurie mansion is worth, you cannot find it. It's not open to the public. This individual is very private. He's actually very nice. I've met him, but he reads a lot. He's got tons of books inside. You always see him like reading, you know, or on the balcony and stuff. Really, really nice guy. But that's the only information I'm allowed to give. He's a divorce lawyer. Obviously, his career is going very well, especially since the pandemic. I'm sure it's good. All right, right this way. So right behind me is actually the only elementary school, in fact the only school here in the French Quarter still functioning today. It's a gateway school called the Winchester Elementary School. I always like to pause here and tell you guys there are two crazy characters that went to school here. First one is Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassin. Oh my God. Second one had short shorts, a big afro, and this guy loved to sweat to the oldies. Richard Simmons!
Oh my God.
You don't know this person, but he loves to help old ladies work out, right? And he's got a big old afro. He's a funny character. You should know. Yes.
Very
That's your homework assignment. All right. And actually, at the end of the block, we have a place called Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. It is said to be the oldest bar in America since 1772. Wouldn't that be awesome if that were totally true? It's half true. We were part of America until 1776. But also, do you guys think Prohibition worked here?
Yeah, bro.
So they sent a team. Do you know what Prohibition is? You do. High five. You're a smart guy. All right. So during that time, they sent a team of individuals all across America to document how long it would take to be offered alcohol in each metropolitan city. And New Orleans was a whopping 36 seconds. And we're very proud of this number, by the way. It was pretty brilliant how they actually smuggled it onto Bourbon Street. They actually hired 10-year-old boys, took kerosene lamps, dumped out the kerosene, put the alcohol in its place, and they're like, on bourbon. It's pretty awesome. Now, Pirate Jean Lafitte, who's this guy? He existed in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and what brought him to fame is because, well, first of all, he was not afraid of individuals. He would get in people's faces. For example, he was having an affair with the mayor's wife, Mayor Claiborne, and so he put out a wanted sign, wanted Pirate Jean Lafitte, $500. And this is the kind of guy the pirate was. He looks at this and he's like, oh yeah, I can do better than that. Hires his own artisan, makes his own wanted sign. Wanted Mayor Claiborne, $1,500. Puts a smack dab right by his own wanted sign. This infuriated the mayor. He's like, he pulls his wanted sign down and is like, okay, that's not working. So Andrew Jackson actually was our general at the time. We were on the brink of war with the British in the Battle of New Orleans. He knew that the pirates went out into the Gulf of Mexico and smuggled a big chunk of the gunpowder. He also knew that those pirates knew how to man cannons and he needed more bodies to help to fight the British. Now what's funny is the British learned of the pirate Jean Lafitte, and they tried to, bribe him to come over to their side, to be a spy for New Orleans. And he's like, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Then at the last minute, he does the pirate thing. He turns around, he's like, to the British and fight side by side. And Jackson helps beat the British, and we save New Orleans from the worst British food ever. And yes.
So earlier I heard that there were not any education schools in are there?
That is true. There are only private schools here. Only private schools. Pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different animal here, I swear. It's like opposite than so many places. We're behind the times, but we're progressive in some ways, but we're really behind the times, but we're so progressive here. Now, Pirate Jean Lafitte, he is considered the only hero in all of American history that's also a pirate. He had his own set of pirate islands, too. His biggest island was called Skull Island. Isn't that the coolest name for a pirate island? Of course, you know, all the essentials, bars, brothels, and overthrows, you know, pirate thing. Now, after the war, Andrew Jackson was told that he has to actually give up his post. So Andrew Jackson was not happy about this, you guys. He threw the biggest tantrum ever. And he was actually taken to the U.S. District Court, fined $1,000 fine, obstruction of justice, and disturbing the peace. Years later, they were like, you know, he had such a big tantrum, he kind of earned it. Let's name it after him. And that's our next stop, the Andrew Jackson Hotel. And may I present the real French Quarter Girl. So we're gonna wait for this lovely lady to scooch down. It looks like she might be done here in just a moment. The Andrew Jackson Hotel, actually in 1794, that second fire that came in, it burned a structure down that was an all-boys boarding school. Unfortunately, it killed a handful of these young boys within it. Now, this is probably, and if you guys come forward in the back, this is actually one of the most active hotels in the French Quarter to stay. Anybody staying here? No? Okay. This is a good one, you guys. It's a really good one. Now, 1990, a honeymooner couple comes down here. They had a disposable camera. Do you know what a disposable camera is? You do? Awesome. Smart cookie. All right, so they came here. They had a short trip. You know, they were newlyweds. They'd never been to New Orleans. They've also never seen an alligator. So they were, you know, really like determined to go to those swamps. Now, when they got in, they do what a lot of tourists do, and they rock it out a little bit too much on Bourbon Street the first night. The next day, they're like, ugh. They do a city bus tour. They're staying in the business district and then the garden district. And it's their last night in New Orleans. Their flight's the following afternoon, and they realize, oh my gosh, we never booked a swamp tour. So they go down to the visitor center and we're like, do you have anything left today? No, I'm sorry, they're all booked out. Oh my gosh, well, we're leaving tomorrow afternoon. Well, it looks like we have an 8 a.m. slot. And they look at each other like, can we do that? They're like, I can do it. I think we can do it. We're going to have a rough morning, but I think we can do it. So they end up booking the 8 a.m. tour, and they decide to stay in the Quarter their last night at the Andrew Jackson Hotel. So they actually decide, you know, we've got 2 photos left on our disposable camera. So because we're probably going to have some beverages, let's leave this behind. It's probably a good call because A, we'll lose it, or may end up taking these photos, you know. So they do just that. They go to Frenchman Street, they whoop it up there, they have a nightcap on Bourbon, come back here, fall asleep, they wake up the next day, they barely make their tour. It's a rough morning for these guys. They do remember, though, their cameras. So that when they go out to the swamps and they see the alligators, they're like, oh my God, honey, where's the camera? They go to pull out the camera, go to take a photo, and all the pictures are taken. So they look at each other like, do you remember taking this? I don't remember taking this. Do you remember anything when we got home? No, I don't remember anything when we got home. So they're like, well, I guess we'll find out later. So they go home, they develop the film, and they're going through their photos and reminiscing about their great trip in New Orleans. And then they stop at the last 2 photos because the photos are of the couple sleeping in their hotel beds from this perspective. Now, this is actually a famous investigation. They actually wanted to sue the hotel. They had a full-on thing. They checked all the cameras, security. They went and interviewed staff members. They could not figure out how this was done. They attribute this to the little kids that haunt the place playing pranks.
Oh my.
So very common things that happen to me is my hair gets pulled a lot. And it's usually when I'm standing where she is. If people have hand grenades on my tour, they look like toys. So their grenades get pulled. The funniest thing that ever happened to me was on a tour. There was actually a 12-year-old girl that flew in because her father was here for a convention for an entire weekend, and her daughter flew in to just, hang out with her dad for a couple days. She was all about the ghosts. Dad wasn't. Dad could not care less about this tour. He had a really nice suit on, and he was fiddling with his phone in the back literally the entire tour. When we got to this location, though, I noticed him kind of messing with his pants, and he was like having issues with his phone and looking frustrated. So after the tour, he pulls me aside and he's like, I don't believe any of this crap. But, and then he looks at his daughter and says, earmuffs, honey. Puts his ears like this. And he's like, during the, that hotel that was over there? I'm like, oh yeah, the Andrew Jackson Hotel. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Andrew Jackson Hotel. And he's like, yeah. Well, when I was standing over there, something kept pulling my pants down. And I was like, oh really? That's funny. I've never heard that one before. And he's like, no, you don't understand. And then he takes his daughter's hands here and goes like this. And everybody's gone. It's just them at this point. He drops half a trowel to show me he's wearing tighty whities. He's like, these bad boys are hard to pull down. And it was one of the funniest things like I've ever experienced on my tour. So funny. Yes.
You said hand grenade as a drink.
So hand grenades are a drink. They look like a hand grenade, and there's a huge history behind, it's part of our cocktail history tours. But we were one of the first cities to open up from the outside to serve beverages because there was issue money and all that stuff. Now it looks like they're moving on. Let's make our way a little bit further. Location, honestly, you might experience electrical problems, technical problems. Your phone may not work. You plug it in and it's fully charged, and then it's just not functioning. You might turn on the TV and it flickers on and off. Maybe it even turns off. You turn it back on, it turns off. You would not believe how many people have had this experience. More and more and more just coming here. Even the 5:30 earlier tour, people will be out here, they'll be having a little smoke break, and they'll listen and be like, wait a minute, is this place haunted? I've been experiencing that too. Now, this is the part of the tour where I show you some ghosts. Now, right around the full moon and new moon, those are like really intense times, and those are good times to see apparitions and auras. They're high energy times. And one of the biggest active times is Halloween. So one of my fellow tour guides actually took a tour of 28 people out, and he took, occasionally as tour guides will take photos, as you've seen me take some photos as we walk through, and we capture apparitions. My tour guide friend got a couple of those apparitions of those ghost kids from this location. So I'm going to start with you, sir. Now, we were trying to debate on why, because everybody has, after he took this image, everybody was going to his location trying to recreate the image and capture these ghosts. After conversating with the other tour guides, we came to a consensus. They know us. We're out here literally every single night talking about them, and that's how we were able to kind of make sense of it. So, this is the Andrew Jackson Hotel. I'm gonna start here and jump to the end and go down. So there's the Andrew Jackson Hotel. And then you see two people walking past. You see the ghosts right there? Isn't that crazy? Yeah. All right. So we're going to start over here. The Andrew Jackson Hotel. And then if you zoom in, you see people walking past. You guys want to, do you feel comfortable? Do you want me to come to you? There's Andrew Jackson Hotel. If you zoom in, you see two people walking past. You see little kid apparitions like that? Okay, so here's the end. Did you see it? You see two people walking past and then those little kids right there. Okay, so here's the Andrew Jackson Hotel. Zoom in, there's two people walking
After
past.
the war officially ended.
He felt like his mother partner. He's like, who's me? Who's there? And then John Travolta comes out. He's like,
People walking past.
We got a second gold medal in Chloe Kim.
oh, this looks like Yes.
Next thing you know, this kid's like, oh, I'm 16. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean you're 16? And he's like, yeah, I've never had kids.
What's so interesting about this location too, where these kids actually were?
What?
Do you guys remember the upside down keyhole? So, anytime somebody passes away, we have a second line jazz funeral. Oh, please make your way to the sidewalk, madam. So when somebody passes away, it's a brass band followed by a procession of people that wear white, always white to commemorate the dead. Black absorbs and white expands. The recently departed in a carriage and a hearse or in a carriage, and then a row of officers at the tail end. Instead of going right up the street to the cemetery, they will always zigzag up and down and around. The reason they're doing this is because they believe that they're trying to confuse the spirit, so the spirit doesn't find their way back to the property to haunt the property they died in. But say you have that mother-in-law and you're like, she's gonna come back and she's gonna haunt me for sure, right? She's gonna find me. So preventing hauntings, that people will go the extra mile, and in the 1800s they would purchase upside down keyholes. They do this to confuse the spirit, so the spirit will think that their keys won't work. They're not in this realm. They don't function like a human being. We can't pretend to know, but they've actually been doing this. Yes, squirrel. They've actually been doing this for a very long time, all the way throughout the Southeast. So those upside down keyholes are not just Louisiana. You can find them out in the middle of the nowhere in Oklahoma, Georgia, the Carolinas, Mississippi, Missouri, all the way up to Connecticut, Illinois. Illinois is crazy haunted, by the way. So one of these upside down keyholes is literally right where the apparitions of these kids were actually captured, which is so fascinating. Right this way. And this is also the old U.S. History Court, and there is a plaque like this photograph for history nerds.
That's you, history nerd. You might want to take a picture of that. Upside down keyhole.
My husband knew one end, he did it upside down.
Oh, did he?
By accident.
Oh, huh. You know, that happens sometimes. Now, do you remember the old Sears catalogs?
Yeah. No.
Cornstalk Fence is a Sears catalog house. It was actually purchased in a catalog, put on a train, and put together in pieces. Elvis Presley stayed here when he filmed Sweet Creole. Bill and Hillary Clinton stayed here. A lot of celebrities have come and stayed at the Cornstalk Hotel. Unfortunately, it's been closed for years.
It's cute. Yeah, just. And get rid of this tree. Is the hotel, that's the hotel? Yeah. Does anybody live in there or stay there? Oh, somebody stays there? Watching it?
Now,
What a beautiful door, huh?
a lot of daytime tour guides will tell you this grandiose story about how the owner of the property missed the cornfields of North Carolina that is a load of you know what. It is from a Sears catalog. You can see a lot of these cornstalk fences in the Garden District. Just FYI. All right, we're gonna cross over to the other side, but not really.
Crossover.
Little ghost tour humor there.
Are you cold?
This looks haunted, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Probably extremely haunted. Yeah, recycling is new in New Orleans as artists pick that up and make art pieces. That's recycling here in New Orleans, unfortunately. Now, this structure behind me, this creepy building that's green, this is actually the Madame John's Legacy Museum. It's been closed even prior to COVID for its renovations. This is also, like the Ursuline Convent, one of those three structures that actually survived those Great Two Fires. It has tons of information about those Great Two Fires within it. Now, you might notice that this looks familiar if you've seen two motion pictures, Interview with a Vampire and also 12 Years a Slave. Now, it's currently being used for the Interview with a Vampire series as well. Now, this is actually part of, if you look to the left, this is the Spanish colonial style. This is kind of, although this was built during Spanish time, this is actually reminiscent of a French colonial style, so you can see like there's some pretty big differences going on. I personally prefer the Spanish style. Right? It's really cool. Now we are smack dab in the middle of the Voodoo Museum and also a shop called Voodoo Authentica. And we're going to actually make our way a little bit further down for the
Is there
steps.
somebody in that building or are they?
Well, this is private residences. Oh, hi, Peter. So, right beside us, you'll see a sign that says Voodoo Authentica. If you want to go to one voodoo shop here in the French Quarter that is authentic, this is the one to go to. Every single person there is a voodoo practitioner that practices and is sitting on the same page. They bless the shop simultaneously, and as you go inside to the very back, you'll notice a lot of different cubbies, and they're dedicated to specific voodoo saints, aka Loas. All of them have their own personalities, and people offer different things depending on which voodoo saint they're talking to. There's some for marriage, some for money. You know, if you're in, you know, wanting to call in like a house to buy, things like so. Very common offerings at voodoo altars, and they'll never say no to these three things, by the way: tobacco, spiced rum, and money. Always welcome to the Loas. They're always like, yes, bring it on. So a lot of people, you'll see little like rum shooters and things like that. A lot of people like to go to Congo Square, and in Congo Square, put it at the foot of the witness tree, aka the Egong tree. You'll see a statue of a lot of those Haitian slaves, and off to the left, a huge, huge, huge tree. At the foot of the tree, or even within the tree, you might see coins as offerings that are pushed in, and little offerings around. You'll know which one it is. So a lot of people that come into the city, they want to give an offering to the ancestors. They bring, you know, a cigarette or a little bottle of spice rum. Don't worry, they will I can't talk about voodoo unless I talk about a woman by the name of Marie Laveau. So she actually was born in 1801 of September, and believe it or not, and this blows a lot of people's minds, but she was literally she actually was a devout Catholic her life. Devout Catholic, she learned from Voodoo roots her grandmother. Now she was a first generation free black Creole woman of color, and her parents were from France and Haiti. Her mother purchased her freedom with the Code Noir. She had lighter skin, she was a little more socially acceptable at that time. Now she actually opened a hair salon, and she had to make money. And when she was in her work, she'd also hear a lot of the stories of what women do in salons, right? She was an excellent businesswoman. But when she learned of her voodoo roots through her grandmother, she, you know, ever since she was a child, she was fascinated with, you know, herbalism. So she was actually an herbalist, devout Catholic. She purchased a tomb for slaves that couldn't afford their own burials. She also purchased slaves because she was a free black Creole. Now everybody would gossip about this Marie Laveau. They were very suspicious of her and with her voodoo dealings. As people would go to her salon, go into the back and conduct business, and she would offer them different herbs, give them candles, oils, everything. A lot of the voodoo practitioners in the community say that you didn't go there to have your hair done really. You actually went there to be touched by this healing woman's hands. Now, some people say she had 19 children, other people say she had 27, only 2 survived. Unfortunately, miscarriages were a very big impact on her. Now, Marie Laveau II and then Marie Laveau III were her kids. They both looked very similar to me, so after she passed on, people thought that she was immortal, because she was the younger version of her, right? Now, now, there were 2 men that were to be hung in Jackson Square. There were 2 innocent slaves, and she hears about this. She was a woman that stood up for other slaves, big time. And she shows up into Jackson Square, and although Jackson Square is a beautiful park today, you guys, that was the old gallows where they had public execution. So these 2 men were to be hung. She learns of this, and as she walks into the square, right when she does, a gust of wind comes in and blows those nooses over. Everybody is convinced, tells themselves that it must be Marie Laveau's magic. Well, guess what happens? These men go free. And literally it is said that that was the last time they had public hangings in Jackson Square because of Marie. Now she was born in 1801, guys, she lived till her early 80s. She also helped with yellow fever. She did minor nursing, which was minor surgeries back then. And what was happening with these slaves that she was buying? Going into her house and never seen again. Well, all the local, very hardcore Catholic women who were gossiping up a storm just assumed that she was sacrificing them. Oh my goodness. Well, guess what she was doing? Part of the underground group. She was smuggling slaves to freedom in Canada. Now, there's so many misguided stories about this woman, but really, because she practiced voodoo, she was never actually anointed a saint, but she is revered as a mother figure, a healer, and a saint. Every year on the Eve of St. John, they gather in Bayou St. John, where the salt water meets the fresh water. Those to be initiated into the voodoo faith arrive wearing all white, covered their hair, and similar to the Catholic faith, are submerged in water, right? Her statue is there, and oftentimes, because she did own a salon, people would offer her hairbrushes, hair ties, hair clips, anything that had to do with beauty. Her favorite colors were pink, so oftentimes pink candles, white candles, and blue candles are also lit for her. Now, a lot of the voodoo saints, they have animals associated with them and also specific colors. the most extravagant of all of the villas that Hollywood loves to do stuff on is the Baron. People always love the dark stuff, right? The Baron Samadi, he communicates with the underworld. He's got a skull face, top hat, he's always smoking a cigar, and he has a huge snake wrapped around him, and that snake is actually called Zombie. So, you know, he's actually got the wife. This woman, believe it or not, actually originally came from Ireland. Now, the Irish were enslaved in Haiti with those Haitian slaves, and they learned about St. Bridget. St. Bridget actually carried over to New Orleans, and New Orleans votive practice officiated her into the religion, and she then became a mongoose. She caretakes the cemeteries and the dead. She's associated with the black rooster and the color purple. If you're, interested in learning more, talk to an individual who actually practices. What can you buy in a voodoo shop? Well, if you go inside to the left, you'll see all these little packets of oils off to the side. You have some if you want to bring in creativity in your life. If you want to bring in abundance. Fertility. Fertility isn't just fertility, guys. It's also you're planting a seed and you want to make it grow. So maybe you started a new business, you want to see it flourish. You can buy candles and drop the oils in the candles. You can have the individual dress it for you with different herbs and things, depending on what you want to bring in. Full moon is for relief, and new moon is for calling. A lot of people like to burn a candle for 7 days on the new moon or the full moon. Doesn't matter what practice or what religion, people are very versatile with that. Also, there are little bags off to the side, they're little cloth bags filled with herbs. Those are actually called grist. They look like grist. These are a little bag of herbs constructed by the highest voodoo practitioner of the shop. They pray upon it for it to function. They also personalize that. A lot of people don't realize this, but I've had a lot of people break down crying at the end of my tours. They're suffering. They have autoimmune conditions, cancers. Perhaps they lost a loved one. People literally will come here from all around the world for healing. So a lot of people will seek out counsel from voodoo priests and priestesses and stuff. They don't practice it, they just seek that healing. So these little bag of herbs are the coolest gifts ever, by the way. They're think of them as good luck charms. You can get one for protection, for safe travels, but this is very specific. For women, you always carry it on your left side. That's your feminine side. For men, you carry it on your right side. That's your masculine side. If you show up at home, hey guys, this is a voodoo bag, a present for you, constructed by the highest voodoo practitioner in New Orleans. Coolest gift ever. Doesn't take up much luggage room either, guys. That's pretty great. You'll be the hit of your family, maybe. Depending on how religious the family is. Voodoo is a very, taboo subject. A lot of people, watch Discovery Channel. They see all the sacrificing animals and all that stuff. Guys, we go to the supermarket. So people seek out healing. Also, witches in the community. There's Wicca, which is a religion. There's witchcraft, which is actually a practice. Alchemy, that's a form of science. And then you have, of course, paganism, which is multiple gods, and oftentimes they'll associate a lot of Egyptian practices with that. You go to different gods and goddesses for different things. Different strokes for different folks, right? But there's also a lot of misconceptions around that as well. Now, voodoo dolls. Voodoo dolls, guys. Okay, so the voodoo doll that you see in the shop today, that actually comes from the 1970s Europe. Gotta love Hollywood. Dolls were used though, but not in the way you think. So if you're a plantation owner at that time, it was a very taboo thing to even talk about a voodoo doctor, or let alone going to see one. Now, say a plantation owner was here, they had their carnival house here, because the plantations are an hour out, they come here to party for carnival season, right? Show off their wealth and rebels. Well, perhaps that plantation owner's here and then suddenly experiences the most excruciating stomach ache they've ever had. They go to the local physician, and what does he prescribe? opium, right? And of course that wears off, and then that stomachache comes back. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't even handle it. So as a last resort, he might be like, I got it. I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes. So he might sneak out in the middle of the night so nobody gossips and sees him, going into the slave quarters and request the assistance of a voodoo doctor. Well, these individuals were poor. They couldn't read or write. How would they catalog their patients coming in, and what would they give him to begin with? Well, peppermint tea, chamomile tea, herbal tinctures, holistic herbs. And how would they remember? They would use whatever they had, you guys, kind of like gumbo. Gumbo, you take what you got and you throw it in a pot and boom, gumbo, right? Well, they used what they could, and they would make dolls out of whatever they had, whether it be, like twigs and, hay or Spanish moss, which back then they thought that evil spirits were carried by Spanish moss. They also thought malaria at one point was carried by Spanish moss. Do you guys know the nearest family member to the Spanish moss is the pineapple? Isn't that wild? So they would make these dolls, and they would actually put clothing on these dolls that looked like the individual that came in to be treated. And then to remember what they treated, place a pin in the place they helped treat with holistic herbs. Man, this is quite the opposite of what we've been told, right? But if you were an enslaved person at that time and you didn't have a way to protect yourself, and then this opportunity came along where they were convinced it was something it was not, wouldn't you let them continue to think it was evil so they didn't mess with you? And there you have it, you guys. So the next time you look at a voodoo doll, it is to catalog patients for healing. Crazy, right? Pretty wild. All right, guys, so we're going to actually go to the end of the block, and then we're going to go to our last stop, right?
Shannon, my future ex-wife.
That guy knows 8 different languages and has lived all around the world. He's probably one of the coolest tour guides ever. You have the best tour guide ever!
Speaking of a sister from a different mister. Sorry, folks. If you do not treat her well, I will come and eat you later. I will come and eat you later.
Okay, so this is a very short stop, but so back in the 1800s, Dad had to keep the boyfriends away. So say you're invited to a party. Your beautiful 16-year-old daughter was left at home. All the servants go to bed, and then halfway to the party, Dad is like, honey, I'm not feeling too good about something. I feel something's off. I'll meet you at the party. When he comes home, he hears 2 voices, sees the candle lit, and one of those voices is male in his 16-year-old daughter's bedroom. So what does he do? He grabs a shotgun and chases this young boy. So while that boy strategically and carefully climbed up to sneak into the daughter's bedroom, do you think he's going to take his time coming down being chased with a shotgun?
No.
That's why these are called Romeo spikes, because they go up a Romeo, but they come down a Juliet.
That was right.
guys remember earlier when we were at the Beauregard Kaya's house and I was talking to you guys a little bit about Walt Disney? So this street directly behind me, right where that archway is, that is actually where Walt Disney would set up his easel and paint. You can see this entire street scene recreated in Disney World. Now, right on the corner is a place called Dark Matters. This is actually new to the quarter. This is an oddity shop. Taxidermy bats and skulls and all sorts of the weirdest stuff. Oddity shops are a rarity. You'll see them in big metropolitan cities usually, but they're quite rare. So this is a cool thing to check out tomorrow if you're in town. Now, another new establishment is on Royal Street called the Vampire Cafe. If you go there, you can get little fake tattoos and get bite marks on your neck. And for the big kids, you guys can get wine in blood bags to go. Like serious blood bags. Best ribeye steak I've had in a long time, by the way. Oh, by the way, are there any NCIS fans here?
Oh yeah.
So NCIS New Orleans actually shot here last on this street. It was like a circus scene with a big like Cadillac with bullhorns on it. They actually did film here as well.
Don't go around.
So I used to say we had finally reached our final destination, but people didn't like that. So I will say this is actually our final stop of the tour. Now this huge mansion behind you that wraps around, this is Muriel's restaurant. If you want to spend a lot of money on your meal, this is the place to do it. This is not a very inexpensive restaurant, but it's so beyond amazing. Crawfish, crepes, shrimp crepes, things like that. Now, back in the day, during that great fire I told you guys about, was actually burned down, and a man by the name of Pierre Jourdain Antoine actually purchased the property, and he vowed at this point to his children would forever live in his home for all of eternity. The only thing is, this guy, big shocker, was an alcoholic. I know, in New Orleans, rare thing. Also, he was a bad gambler. A lot of travelers came in and wined and dined at his home, had a great old time, and moved on. Sometimes he was good at dealing hands, sometimes he was lousy. One particular night, he was hustled. Ends up bringing the deed to his house downstairs. He is surefire to win, and he loses his home. He goes upstairs and begins to drink himself into oblivion, and decides at the end of this evening that he can no longer live with himself because of his poor decision making and losing this house, disappointing his family. So he actually hangs himself in the upstairs back room, which is actually called the Redemption Room today. Now in early 2000s, a place called Muriel's opens up and they start to notice there's some weird stuff going on. They come in and all the freezer doors are open in the kitchen, all the inventory spoils. Bartender goes upstairs, puts all of his row of glasses up and gets ready for the night, turns around, and then a sea of glass gets pushed against his back. Patrons come in and they dine. When they come back from the restroom, they go to sit down, and that chair is slightly pushed to the side, and they fall on the ground. Things like this keep happening. So what happens here in New Orleans when you got crazy stuff going on? Bring in a team of psychics. So this psychic goes upstairs. They actually have a seance room. It's called the Redemption Room, but now called the seance room. And they actually, and this is a very, I've actually asked psychics on my tour if this actually does happen. And all of them that I've talked to have said that it's like crowds of people trying to talk to them all at once. Now, during that process when they had the seance, she said that there was one voice louder than the rest, and through a series of questions, realized it was Pierre Jourdain Antoine. He was really, really mad that people were coming into his house unannounced. So what do you do when you have an angry spirit? You give them an offering. So this side they sat down with the management staff. I know it sounds really weird, but this actually did happen. They sat down with the management staff, and what she suggested is maybe setting up a table and chairs, a separate space for Antoine to feel welcome, 2 glasses of wine, 2 baguette breads, and 2 placemats. And they break that down in the beginning of they started at the beginning of the day and then break down at the end of the day. They've been doing this every single day for years, you guys, for years. And every day that they do this, the hauntings are diminished 90%. If anything is forgotten, like a baguette bread or a glass of wine, weird things happen in the forest. That's supposed to be right. No!
Cumberland Lakes is better.
So that ghost table is directly behind you folks at the very, very end in that little room. It looks like they've broken down the wine glasses, but if you guys walk back here tomorrow during the day, you will see it full up, 2 glasses of red wine like he enjoyed, 2 baguette breads, and 2 placemats. And don't forget, guys, we're the Northern Caribbean, so we're a hustle city. So if you want to pay to dine with Antoine, you can. For $50 extra a head.
Oh my God.
Not including your very expensive meal or your further options. You guys, I want to thank you so much. It's been so much fun. My name is Shannon, and this is Legendary Walking Tours. Thank you guys. I want you guys to know exactly where you are so you can get to your destination safely. You guys are on Charter Street. 2 blocks behind you is Bourbon Street. If you go a block this way, you're going to run into Decatur and also Cafe Du Monde. Towards the Skyscrapers Canal, please do not walk past Canal Street at night. It's not the safest. I encourage you guys to take a Lyft and an Uber. You can easily catch that on Decatur Street. We started up a block and down 2 blocks at the Visitor Center. It's currently closed. But if you want to continue going that way, you will run into eventually Frenchman Street, where all the locals go for nightlife. If you guys are a little bit hungry, you can go 2 blocks up, take a right, go down a couple blocks, and you will see a place called Nola Po' Boys. Awesome po' boy shop. There's also a 24-hour breakfast place called Clover Grill, which is, I believe, up a couple blocks to the right on Bourbon Street. This part of Bourbon is more local bourbon. Past this street, St. Anne, which if you turn right here, you're going to actually see Louis Armstrong Park completely lit up. Has anybody seen behind the cathedral at night yet? No. So if you have not, past the cathedral, there's the alley to the left of the cathedral. That is called Pirates Alley. Half a block down is the Pirate Absinthe Bar. But if you continue forward and take a right, you will see a huge spotlight on the Jesus statue. I call him Touchdown Jesus. Because he casts like this huge, glorious shadow on the cathedral that is stunning. It is one of the biggest photo ops. Or you can go this way. You can take a right on St. Anne, see Louis Armstrong Park, and take the next left on Royal Street. I do have these lovely little cards. They're actually little review cards. I get big, huge brownie points. It makes me look like I'm doing my job. I do accept tips. I have Cash App and Venmo as well. If you didn't like the tour, this is Nick Page Walking Tour. That's a wrap, you guys. Thank you guys. Sorry, my hands are so cold.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys have an awesome evening. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we need to find out.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Do a review for it.